Hi, everyone. Welcome to another session of our Done with Divorce. This is part of our Discovery to Divorce, what happens from the time that you decide to get divorced until you are actually, finalized with your divorce. So we do want to include a very important topic. We invited Julia Ward, who is a resident in counseling with Sunstone Counseling, in the Northern Virginia area. There are several locations. She'll share a little bit about that. And really her presentation, she's done this so many times for us and so, beautifully done, because it's important to just, really think about all of the family elements, the emotions that go into making this decision and throughout the entire process. So today, Julie will be speaking with her subject of topic, which is coping with divorce, family, and emotional issues. So welcome, Julia.
Thank you. So I will just jump right in. So we are, like I said, like Elise just said, I am Julia Ward. I'm a resident counseling at Sunstone Counseling. I'm under supervision by Amy Clay, who's one of the co-owners of Sunstone. And Sunstone Counseling has 5 different locations in Virginia: Falls Church, McLean, Alexandria, Ashburn, and in Richmond. So you can visit us online at sunstonecounselors.com if you'd like to look into finding a counselor for yourself or your family, or you can feel free to connect with me at julia@sunstonecounselors.com. So for the divorce process, obviously, I think most people don't go into the marriage process thinking that one day it will end in divorce, right? Unfortunately, about 50% of marriages end in divorce. So it's important to remember that you're not alone. I think a lot of times people have that feeling like when they're going through a divorce that it really feels like they're the only person who's going through this. Maybe that's true. Maybe you are the only person in your life that's going through a divorce at that particular point in time. And it can feel really isolating if you don't have other people who are either going through it currently or have gone through it before. And so something that I try to encourage people to do, even just from a self-compassion standpoint, of just reminding yourself that I'm not alone. Like I said, 50% of marriages end in divorce. So there are lots of other people who are likely going through the divorce process at the exact same time as you. If you are in that position where not many people have like a divorce experience concurrent with your experience, it's important to kind of think about like, what is it that I have in common with these people that are in my life that I'm trying to connect with? Because it would be really helpful to still have things to like, that you feel like you have things to talk about other than the divorce, right? Because sometimes it feels like I'm just constantly talking about the divorce, and sometimes it's helpful just to be like, okay, I'm going to relate to this person on I don't know, a book that I'm reading, or different things that are of interest to you that could be helpful just to connect on. There's different types of divorce. Cooperative, this is when both parties agree that divorce is the next right step for the relationship. Angry divorce might look like one person wants it, the other person is not on board, and they're hostile or angry toward the other party. And distance might be that the one person or both are not hands-on in the divorce process. And so that might look like it taking a long time to reply to things or to respond, or it might feel like that person just disappears and they are not responsive at all. The way that a divorce is handled has a lot to do with how the decision was made to separate and divorce. It's important to look at like who was the leaver of the relationship versus the person who was left. Was it your choice or not? The truth is that it's going to be emotional either way. Like for the person who decides to leave the relationship, that's emotional, and for the person who's left, it's emotional, right? And so that's important to remember. And then whether it was a collaborative decision, like if this was something that you worked together on and decided that this was the next, like I said, the next right step for the relationship, or if like a forced relation or a forced decision, like where one person comes to you and says like, I want a divorce, right? Like that's not really a choice in that regard if one person wants it and the other person does not. And then it's also important to pay attention to whether there was emotional, psychological, verbal, or physical abuse in the relationship. Just to be mindful of the roles that you played in the marriage, and to be cautious about falling into those patterns while you're going through the divorce process, because sometimes patterns are familiar, and so we end up falling into the same types of patterns. And so you want to be mindful of whether the patterns that are happening in the divorce process are ones that you want to maintain, or if there are things that you want to change. For counseling through the divorce process, there's several different ways that you can get counseling support. So one would be to seek individual counseling. This would be for the individuals involved, whether that's you, your ex-partner, or your children. So this is where you would meet weekly or every other week with a counselor, an individual counselor who provides you with support, who is just entirely focused on you. I feel like so much of our time is spent on other people a lot of times. And so this is a place where, you know, you deserve support while you're going through such an emotional process. And so this is a place where you can come and just have an hour where it's just focused entirely on you, your perspective, your feelings, and processing the experience for yourself. Family counseling, again, meeting weekly or every other week. This helps you to determine the next best steps for your family, what this new chapter of family life is going to look like, and how the rules and dynamics will change. This could be with you and your partner, or you, your ex-partner, and your children, or with your ex-partner only, just for co-parenting or uncoupling support. And then there's group counseling. So there are support groups. This is where you meet with other people who are going through a divorce at the same time, whether it's like separated by gender, or if it's just everybody all in there together, but providing the support of other people who are going through something similar at the same time. For instance, like I run a weekly divorce and separation group for women at times throughout the year. So I'll mention that a little bit later, but that's something that if you thought that group counseling would be supportive, or at least like, especially if you're in that position where you feel like you're the only person in your life at that time that's going through a divorce, it can be really helpful to seek that setting so that you have that ability to hear like how other people's perspectives and how other people feel as they're going through the divorce process. Again, it helps you to not feel so alone. Now we're going to move into talking a little bit about the different emotions that come up through the divorce and separation process. So this is the 5 stages of grief, which was created by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. So this was thought to be more of a staged model, as opposed to now it's more thought of where it's like a cycle where you can kind of bounce around from one place to the next, right? As opposed to like having to progress in a certain order. So if we start with denial, this is one of the first stages of grief and loss, but again, you can bounce back and forth. And I think this graphic does a really great job of showing that, right? Like you could go around the like the circle, or you could like go back and forth between the different stages. Denial can be a helpful coping mechanism that helps protect us from becoming too emotionally overwhelmed with more than we can handle at the time. Sometimes this might look like numbness or just trying to get through the day. And after a while, the denial may begin to fade and feelings about the loss may begin to surface. Anger is another emotion that can come up through this process, a totally, completely normal emotion to experience after the loss of a relationship. A lot of times, especially for women, there can be like this hesitancy to express anger or to like allow that emotion to be there. And so I would just encourage you to sort of raise your awareness of the different emotions that you're experiencing, and you know, just be aware of the different ways that it could be popping up, right? Like it could look like it not just anger towards your ex-partner, but it could look like anger towards, I don't know, traffic, or your friends, or family, coworkers, like you name it. Like you could just note that there's like irritability or anger showing up in different places. Bargaining is an attempt to stop the pain and undo the damage that has been done for your life. So for the leaver, it's usually in this stage that that person decides whether or not they made the right decision about leaving. And the leavee might be trying to pursue or win back their ex-partner, regardless of the cost to their self-esteem, right? Like they might be like, okay, how can I change? How can we do these different things? Can we do these different things to try to get back together and get our relationship back on track? And then depression. So this sometimes might feel like debilitating sadness that just feels like it might go on for forever. Might look like you withdrawing from social situations, experiencing changes in your eating and sleeping. Hygiene may suffer, irritability. The important thing to remember is that you do not have to go through this alone. And like I said before, having a counselor that can help you process the emotions can be really helpful as you're going through this process. And then at the end of this like, again, if we're thinking about it as a staged approach, that acceptance would be something where it feels like there's light at the end of the tunnel, recognizing that you've made it through an incredibly difficult experience. And again, with the bouncing around the circle, it doesn't mean that you won't sometimes still experience negative emotions, right? You might be feeling accepting of the relationship being over one day, and then might be feeling like denial or sadness or bargaining or anger another day, right? So it's just important to recognize that, I mean, I think sometimes too, like we feel like the way that we feel is like permanent, and it's important to realize that like things are in seasons, right? Where it's like feelings may change over time. Other common emotions that can come up are guilt. So this is where you can kind of examine the role that you played in the relationship and in the divorce. What were the contributing factors toward the end result of the divorce? I often say that it takes two people in the relationship. So this is sort of an area in which you can kind of like look for, what can I accept responsibility for, what was on my partner, and what would I want changed for a future relationship, right? How would I want to speak up more for myself and my needs, or how would I want my partner to speak up more for their needs? So it's just an ability to sort of take a step back and look and see how you could communicate or recognize needs differently in the future. Pain and fear. So this is where you might be feeling pain over the loss of the relationship in the marriage, and then fear about the future, right? Like oftentimes when people are going through the divorce, like their living situation is changing. They may be going through custody agreements, might be thinking about like dating or future relationships. Friendships may change, holidays, how that's celebrated or who you celebrate with may change. So there's a lot of uncertainty. And so it makes sense that that would be something that would be coming up, like that fear. Loneliness. So it oftentimes in the divorce process, also like you might be alone more often than you were when you were in the relationship, right? Might also be a time that you realize how lonely you were when you were in the relationship, right? Like maybe there were times when you felt like your partner was disappeared or like wasn't showing up in the way that you wanted the partner to be showing up. So it's sort of an opportunity to be really curious about the different emotions that you have going on, whether you're doing that individually or if you have the support of a counselor. Okay, so I mentioned briefly on the last slide about how there might be changes in friendships. So let's talk a little bit about changes in relationships. So I think obviously the dynamic between you and your ex-partner is going to change, right? And like I said, I think at the very beginning, I said you want to be careful of not getting caught in those same negative patterns that you had during the marriage. You want to be aware of those patterns, be present, observe it. Sometimes I give the example of like, if you think about like an anthropologist, when they go into a culture, they're sort of there to observe and be curious about like what's going on in that culture and stuff like that, but they're not really like judging how the people are doing the things that they're doing, right? And so sometimes it can be really helpful to take that perspective of an anthropologist to sort of like zoom out from the day-to-day interactions that you're having with your ex, and instead just sort of like look like, okay, this is the way that they're talking to me, this is the way that I'm talking to them, and just getting really curious about it. And sometimes also like separating the facts from the emotions can be helpful to kind of like be like, okay, what is the fact of like the logistics of what it is that we're trying to navigate here? What are all the emotions that are coming up here? To help ground yourself in that. Communication can be controlled and purposeful. So like I said, focusing on the facts and what it is that you want to make sure that you're communicating can be really helpful. Another tool that I talk about sometimes here is called the RAIN meditation. So the RAIN meditation is something that was created, I believe Tara Brach created it. She teaches mindfulness. And if you Google Tara Brach, you'll find her website, and she has a lot of really great resources. The RAIN meditation is an acronym that stands for recognizing the feeling. The A stands for allowing the experience to be there just as it is. The I stands for investigate with kindness. What is it that's happening inside? What am I believing about these emotions? What is missing? You know, like that kind of thing. And then the N is natural awareness that comes from not being fused with the emotions, right? So like Another way to think about this is if like your feelings are like the ocean, right? Where there's different waves that come through that sometimes there's emotions that come through that are like a really big wave. And sometimes there's emotions that come through that are like just like calm, right? And so the rain meditation gives us a vehicle to be able to observe the different emotions that are there, whether it's a huge wave or if it's just like a calm wave, for us to be able to observe the emotion and not get swept away with it, if that makes sense. It's really hard. So it's something that takes practice. I feel like meditation is often referred to as a practice. So maybe check out the rain meditation if you're interested in learning more about that. Shared relationships with your ex-partner may change, right, along like whether that's like in-laws or like with your friends, the community. It's important to kind of like notice what changes and kind of try to anticipate or like think about like, okay, what kind of things can I expect? And then just trying to build your awareness of them. The parent and child relationship may shift too. So you'll hear me talk about this in the coming slides, but it's really important to maintain, as much consistency as possible. And then for social media can be another place where it can cause some like negative spiraling where like whether it's somebody who like unfriends you or if you like see something on social media, it can be painful, and sometimes it can be a form of self-care to like either limit use of social media or to like block or unfriend people. And something else too that I think about here is that like, I don't know if you guys have like your photos saved somewhere where it like reminds you, like sometimes like Facebook will do like a reminder of like, remember 7 years ago when you were doing this thing or whatever. That can be really painful too, to have those reminders pop up out of nowhere, right? Or like whatever photo storage plan you use, or you know what I mean? Like those different things can kind of like pop up memories. And so it's sort of important to be aware of those types of things and then maybe change your notifications if that's something that is triggering at that time. Okay, communication strategies with your ex-partner. So de-escalation strategies. Like let's say you get like a text or an email from your ex-partner, you have the choice to reply right away or to take a pause before replying. I say that because like sometimes people feel like a need, especially in like our society where it's like everything is like very fast, right? And so there's an opportunity to sort of allow yourself to take a pause. I often say that even in conversations, if someone asks you a question, a lot of times it's okay to say like, you know what, I'll get back to you on that. Like, I don't have an answer for you right now, and I will get back to you. And this gives you the opportunity to reply from a non-emotionally charged state. So to be able to be more regulated and take a more neutral tone when you respond to them. Like I said, sometimes there might be things that you have to reply to immediately, but then other choices there, or other times there might be that choice to take a little pause. Limiting communication, so setting boundaries sometimes on like what days you're going to reply to messages or emails or texts. To just sort of like have that of like, I know that like Tuesday and Wednesday are going to be like a day where it's free of communication from that person, or if that's something that's available to you. Listening more and talking less. So trying to understand that person's point of view without trying to like sway them to our side immediately, to sort of like understand a little bit more where that person is coming from can be helpful. And then with co-parenting, like I said, consistency is really key in terms of like wanting to keep things as consistent as possible for the kiddos. Respect for each other, especially in front of the children, is important. Accepting that there is more than one right way to do things. Like I think oftentimes we get stuck on like, well, this is the way that I handle this, or I don't know, the way that I do this thing. And most of the time, like if it's not like a safety issue, there is more than one right way to do things, right? And then offering consistent discipline. So if your kids are sharing time with both parents separately, it might be important to agree in advance about bedtimes or curfews or other like everyday decisions, or like discipline, like boundaries and that kind of thing. So when you're communicating with your kids about the divorce or the separation, like I said before, I think you'll hear me say consistency so many times, but just like reassuring them and listening to them, making sure that your kids know that the divorce is not their fault, listening to and easing their concerns, and being compassionate and direct in your responses is important. Maintaining stability and routines, trying to keep their daily and weekly routines as familiar as possible so that they know where they're going to be sleeping or who they're going to be with or who's going to be at pickup or drop off and those types of things. Letting your kids know that they can rely on you, making and keeping realistic promises, and not overly confiding in your children about your feelings regarding the divorce. Is it just like, it's important to do that to keep that responsibility, like to help keep the kid from feeling like they have responsibility or they need to help make you feel better or they need to do something. Like I said, you want to make sure that their life is as consistent as possible. And then not involving your children in the conflict. So avoid arguing with or talking negatively about the other parent in front of the kids. Don't use them as spies or messengers or make them take sides. In terms of talking to the kids and answering questions, like how to tell the kids about the divorce or separation, there's different strategies for different ages, like regarding what you should and shouldn't share with children. And what I would really recommend is that you Google or search for an article about how to talk to children about divorce based on their age and developmental stage, because that helps you to see like, okay, because the way that you would talk to a 2-year-old is really different than the way that you would talk to a 15-year-old or a 24-year-old, right? And so it's important to think about that developmental stage that they're in and what information is most pertinent to them at that time. Again, not encouraging taking sides no matter what. And remembering that, like I said, I added that 24-year-old in there too, because like adult children, grandchildren need support as well, right? So it's important to sort of take that into consideration too. What to do when a child is reluctant to go with the changes put in place. So you want, again, to be consistent. You want to tell them about how their day-to-day is going to change. Because they're going to want to know, how is this going to impact me? Like, where am I going to be sleeping? Where am I going to have my toys, right? Like, who's going to be taking me to the pool, right? Like these things that impact their day-to-day life, like that's what they're going to be wanting to know about. Again, listen to what they have to say. And at the end of the day, remember that you are the parent and you and the co-parent are the adults that are making the decisions, and stick to them. Be consistent with what you guys have agreed on. You want to encourage your kids to express their feelings, be open, approachable, and honest. Continue to parent the way that you have been, right? Because like, again, that's a consistent part where it's like, okay, well, this is something that I would have been disciplined for before. So this is something this is a boundary that continues to be a boundary, right? Like this was an expectation that continues to be an expectation, because there's enough changes that are happening without that changing too. And then providing a secure environment and resources for your children. The other thing too is that you might want to like just pay attention to your kids and notice if there's signs that require additional support, like there's changes in sleep or concentration, school issues, substance abuse, or like changed substance use, extreme emotions, not participating in usual activities, like those types of things, like hygiene changes, like things like that. And if you want more feedback or support regarding a specific kid issue, I'd really recommend that you reach out to Sunstone Counseling. We have about 60 counselors across those 5 different locations. And so there are play therapists that work specifically with children. So that's something that would be important to keep in mind as a resource for kids. In terms of taking care of yourself, the same way that I said, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to those changes within your kids. You also want to pay attention to like what changes are happening within you, right? So maybe you could be aware of like maladaptive coping mechanisms, like if you're drinking more, isolating, increased risky behavior or promiscuity, just sort of being aware of the different things that are coming up, right? Like if your sleep is changing, if your hygiene is changing, like that kind of thing. Those all might be signs that you're like, oh, something else is going on here that maybe I could like talk about and try to figure out a different way to support myself. Creating daily practices that help keep you healthy are important. So prioritizing sleep, eating healthy food, exercising, talking about things other than the divorce can be helpful, like to maintain that social support is important. Journaling can be helpful. So sometimes you might just keep a diary. Sometimes you might do logistics of the divorce. So whether it's like journaling about your feelings or keeping track of like on this day this happened, can be helpful because it's like I said earlier, this is going through a divorce is a lot, right? Like there's a lot of different moving parts, there's a lot of changes that are happening. And so this is an opportunity for you to make some space for yourself to really process what's going on. A gratitude practice can be something really helpful too. So there's lots of different ways that you can do this. There's research out there that talks about how if you implement a gratitude practice and write down 1 to 3 things a day that you're grateful for, that it can help impact your mood. I think in a month or two, so, you could look up the research there, but you could either do a gratitude practice where you're writing down 1 to 3 things a day that you're grateful for that day. I say that day because you want to make sure that it's something specific to that day as opposed to something that could have happened on any day. Sometimes people will be like, I'm grateful for my job, or I'm grateful for my house, or I'm grateful for my dog. And it's like, what is the specific thing that your dog did that day that you're grateful for? Maybe you were having a hard time and the dog came over and laid down and put their head on your lap. You know what I mean? So what is it? What is the specific thing that you're grateful for? Another thing that can be helpful with this, if you write it down, is that then when you're having a hard time, you can look back at all the things that you've been grateful for over the past several weeks or months or years even, right? Depending on how long you've been doing it for. And if it's a hard practice for you to start, another way for you to do it is to ask a friend if they would be an accountability partner for you, and just say hey, can we just text each other for a week and say hey, this is what I'm grateful for today. And that would be a way too to have something to talk with them about other than the divorce. I often talk about this, I compare this to this is a shoe metaphor. So I compare this to a pair of shoes where it's we have a tendency to focus on what's uncomfortable. So if I was walking down the street and I was wearing a pair of really uncomfortable shoes, I often think about if I was going to a wedding and the shoes really match my dress, or if I was going to some fancy event or something, my shoes really match my dress and they're super uncomfortable shoes. And so I'm going to be focused on each step that I take in that those shoes. I'm going to be thinking when can I take them off? Am I developing a blister? Am I going to need a Band-Aid, right? There's all these thoughts that are going through my head instead of being aware of the event that I'm at, being with my friends, or whatever, right? As opposed to if we're wearing comfortable shoes, we're focused on our other things that are going on. We're able to notice more about the event, the people that we're with, and that kind of thing. So that's why I think that the gratitude practice is important, because it helps us to raise our awareness of those things that are more neutral to positive, right? As opposed to focusing only on the uncomfortable. The uncomfortable gets our attention because it's uncomfortable, right? And so it's important to raise our awareness of the things that are more neutral to comfortable. Okay, another thing for self-care is to rebuild your sense of self separate from the relationship. So maybe there's hobbies that you haven't been able to pursue that you could take up again, or maybe there's friends that you could reconnect with that you haven't talked to in a while. So that's kind of something to think about. Are there things that you want to regenerate in your life? Redefining your space. So sometimes people change up the way that they're decorating it, right? Maybe their partner didn't like colors or didn't like certain designs or ideas that they had. And so this is an opportunity to create a calm environment for yourself, even if it just means getting a new bedspread or a plant, right? To freshen up the space, just to do something a little different. Practicing meditation, like I said before, that rain meditation can be really helpful. There's a lot of different meditation apps out there that you could find. And then also, like I said before, seeking professional help in an individual or group setting can be really helpful as well. Just to get that support, whether it's just for you individually, where you can talk about whatever's on your mind, or in a group setting where you can hear what other people are going through at the same time. And then this is just a little bit of information about the separation and divorce support group for women at Sunstone. Typically it runs for about 8 weeks. And more recently it's been virtual, open to residents of Virginia. And it's a processing group where we talk about, typically we talk about whatever is on everybody's mind, right? So these are the things that come up normally, which are the emotions surrounding the separation and divorce, self-worth, self-esteem, where do I go from here? What's next in my future, dating, I don't know, living arrangements, stuff like that. And then concerns that they have about like the logistics of the divorce, like the finances, legal issues. And then the social changes that come as a result of the separation and divorce. So if you're interested in joining, you can email me at julia@sunstonecounselors.com, and we can schedule a 15-minute phone consultation just for you to learn more about it. And that goes for individual counseling as well. If you'd like to reach out for that, I'd be happy to have a free 15-minute phone consultation with you. And then these are some book recommendations that we have for divorce and separation and the healing process that you might find helpful. I'm sure that there are a lot of other resources out here that are out there that I have not mentioned. So I would encourage you to find something that vibes well with you, right? Of like, what is it that that you're looking for as a support through this process. And then the last thing that I'll say is just that, like, I know that like learning about the divorce and separation process is really emotional and it's challenging. And so I would just encourage you to think about how you can take care of yourself today, whether that's calling a friend or doing some type of self-care activity that just helps you to stay grounded today as you're going through all these different presentations and learning about this process, because it's a lot, and you deserve to take care of yourself in that way. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Julia. And we're always talking about kind of building your team, and definitely that emotional side is so important to make sure that you're nurturing that during this entire process and then beyond. So I
Definitely.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.